All right, I want to be getting from everybody a little bit of a vibe in terms of your energy levels. We're going to be talking about managing up today, which can take a little bit, can't it? It can take a little bit. So in the chat, tell me, out of 5, where are your energy levels? If 5 is like, amazing, it's Friday, let's go, go, go. And if 1 is like, no, 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 then where are you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we're kind of middly 3s. I'm getting some 3s. Ooh, some 4s. Holly, you're in good spirits. Go, Holly. Yay, Carly. All right, fantastic. Marvelous. All right, so we're kind of 3, 4. Do we think it's 3, 4 because it's Friday? Who knows? Question. Doesn't need an answer. All right, today then we are going to have a chat about managing up. Who here has managing up on their secret wish list of things that they'd like to be better at? Yeah, good. Because honestly, if you don't, it's Friday. Go do something more important. If this is not important to you, go, go, go now. Go to the pub. I don't mind where you go. It's okay. All right. So managing up. Why is managing up important? Who's got budget time coming up? Give me a little wave. Yes. Okay. Anyone got kind of a business case or a proposal that they've got to put together? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anybody kind of getting pressurized to do something they don't want to do, a decision they don't want to make, and maybe they want to kind of position a bit of a pushback? Yes. Yeah. It's inevitable. I mean, this is what happens to us all the time. We are constantly in this space of either asking for something, asking not to do something, or asking for somebody to give us something. This is a fairly constant piece. And one of the things that happens when we're constantly managing up like this is that sometimes we forget how deliberately we've got to invest in it. Sometimes it becomes one of those things that sits at the bottom of our list. Because guess what? We might have more important things to do, such as write the actual proposal, for example. These become big ticket items. And what they actually do is they get in the way of us doing the influencing work that gets the item over the line. So I'm going to explain to you exactly what I mean as we go through the session today. And we're a jam-packed group. So we're going to break out into a lot of little breakout rooms as we go through so that you have an opportunity to meet and chat with each other as we go. So first of all, this little session, we're going to do a tiny little snippet from the system to manage up. The system to manage up, as you'd expect, is quite broad ranging. It covers a little bit of information about what executives really want, which includes a couple of interviews with some CEOs that I know really well and were fairly honest with me about mistakes that their middle managers make. There is a section that's quite chunky about how to build a business case. So if you are just about to start that journey, this could be a really good little self-help guide. There's a section on pathways of influence, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And then there's also a section on public speaking, pitching, and presenting, which is more the performance art of managing up, if you like, or the one-to-many communication style. What we're going to concentrate on today is really around those pathways of influence. So when you're thinking about budget, when you're thinking about pushing back on a request or making a case for something potentially quite formally, this is really what we're going to talk about. So if you've actually got one of those coming up, if you were one of the people who went, yep, that's me, make a little note of whatever the thing is. So what is this business case, this project, this proposal, this pushback that you want to shepherd through to a successful outcome? Because as we learn the techniques for doing this, one of the things that we know makes it kind of 5 times more valuable to you is if you're applying it to a real life situation straight away. So it would really be great if you can do that. That tangibility really helps your brain to learn faster because it really prioritizes that it matters for you. Okay. All right. So let's start with a little quote from one of my favorite people. For those of you who have worked with me for a long time, you'll know that I have a little bit of a crush on a guy called Dan Pink. He's Al Gore's old speechwriter. He's dreadfully, dreadfully clever. He's not very good looking. There's nothing like that. Okay. It's just his brain that I'm in love with. A lot of the things that, Mike, if you had to guess, a lot of the things that I really, really like about Dan Pink's work and his research is how accessible it is. So if you haven't read any of his stuff, I really recommend. It's easy to consume. It's bite-sized pieces of research that is really robust, but really makes sense. And he's huge on the communication space in particular. Having been a comms expert almost all of his life, he's really, really special in this area. And what he says is that at least 40% of a leader's time is spent influencing. Now, he and I have bounced a couple of emails back and forth in the last 2 years about this. And I've argued with him that I think that for really experienced, really gold class operators, it's probably closer to 80%. So his response is, if you're an executive, yes. And if you're approaching the executive, it's 40 to 80. So that's a huge amount. And that's actually the first stat came out of his book, To Sell is Human. So if you think back across your diary at the moment, and you look at the week that's just been and all of those lovely meetings, no white space, but look at the meetings, do you reckon that about half of them are influencing conversations? Or do you reckon they're doing conversations? So were those meetings about the work, progressing work, or were they influencing meetings? And I know sometimes you sort of splice the two, but which ones would you say had a really strong influence purpose versus almost influenced by accident? Because that's going to actually help you start to determine whether you're spending enough time on this over time. So there's a guy that I used to work with who's a chief talent officer now for a very well-known business. And when I started working with him, he was the head of recruitment. And we did a little exercise, which I'd love for you to do, which is we color-coded his diary. So certain meetings that were what he classified as deliberate influencing meetings or conversations, he would color-code a particular color, secret color known only to him. And what he noticed was that he was sitting at about 40% when we first started working together, and he got up to about 65%. That's when he got his first promotion. About 75% was his second promotion. And on average today, as a C-suite leader, he sits at about 75 to 80%. So it's a really cool little visual exercise that you can do. You can go back over last week and just color code the deliberate influence meetings. And then from next week onwards, just start color coding your deliberate influence meetings and see if you can't increase the proportion. Because what we know is of the 4 big drivers that predict B-suite leaders with C-suite impact, that really predict your progression through the ladder. There are 4 of them. 3 of them are about deliberate influence. So the faster you can get this into your diary and start to normalize the meetings that are just about progressing the work and the meetings that are more about deliberately influencing how people think or decide, the faster you'll find you start going up that ladder. So let's talk a little bit about perhaps why you may or may not be doing that. You may or may not be seeing the percentage in your diary already that you like. I'm going to pop you into some breakout rooms and I'm going to get you to just share, what do you think holds you back from really deliberately influencing those around you? So I'm thinking particularly about your business case, your proposals, your pushback. What are you actually doing to really propel that conversation forwards? And if you're not doing enough, so let's pop you in a quick breakout room now. Did we discover? You'd like to share perhaps one of the big themes that came out of their conversation in terms of stuff getting in the way?
Yeah, I was just, hi everyone. I was just talking about, I had a look at my calendar and I went, oh, there's an awful lot of meetings in there that are influential meetings, but very accidental, not deliberate by any chance. And looking at it, I need to be more deliberate in the scheduling of my meetings and actually capture them more so, because I was talking about I've got a very open door policy here where I work and I want to be accessible, but that means I'm accessible to 350 odd people, which sounds insane, but I'm not capturing that, but it does impact my ability to then do project work and deep work and
Influential work.
yeah.
Very important reflection. All right. So who had a little bit of a reflection like that and went, oh, I'm kind of assuming I'm going to fit my influencing into my schedule as opposed to putting my schedule around my influencing? A little bit of a wave if you might be a bit guilty. Yep, that's completely normal. And I very much spent a lot of my career thinking that was the right way to do it, was to, turn on the influencing tactics or the charm when I needed something in the moment. And what I actually started to realize was that without really planning my influencing outcomes, I was, touch and go, let's just say. I was kind of, I was getting lucky sometimes, but it wasn't really part of a plan. It was just getting lucky sometimes. Who else had something come up that was a little bit of a blocker or a barrier to investing more time in deliberate influencing?
I can chat to that. With Evan and Janine, we had a couple of things actually. Firstly, for myself, I'm relatively new in the role, so there's that sense of I haven't got my head around everything yet. I don't really know the detail. Let's wait till I have a bit more knowledge, so I really know what to influence, I guess, and have made those decisions. Others was simply the time spent doing that's just taking up all the energy, but also that you might be measured on your outputs. Like that's actually someone's interpretation of what you've been engaged for. And then also people pleasing came up as a little one, as one as well, to also like it's hard to push back if you like to be a people pleaser. It's hard to push back.
Yeah, very good. All right, so we've got a couple there. There's a few things that go on in our head when we think about getting out of our flow and stepping into kind of deliberately influencing. And unfortunately, particularly managing up you only can really do well when you do it deliberately. There's a lot of things that go on. Number one tends to be in that I'm not expert enough space. I'm just going to keep my head down till I know what I'm talking about, and then I'll influence. And unfortunately, what happens there, and it's we're all particularly guilty of doing this when we get into a new job. We've got a window of making an impression on our executives. And when we've been in that new job for 90 days and we haven't popped our head up and done something proactive, unfortunately, that window has closed and we've made no impact on our executive at all. So it's a really funny, counterintuitive habit or story that we tell ourselves, keep my head down till I know what I'm talking about. Because by the time you know what you're talking about, you might have missed the boat. So there's one to be thinking about. The time, I imagine everybody had time. I am too busy. Did that come up? It didn't. Be mad if it didn't come up. Lucky you. We all think that we are too busy, and we struggle with being able to invest the time up front. Does everybody know what a false economy is? Yes. It's where if we don't invest the time up front, we end up spending much more time pushing that argument uphill later. So it is a really conscious decision that we have to make at times to say, I'm going to not do the busy work because working harder is not going to get me what I need. I'm going to sit down and plan out how I'm going to set people's mindsets up, get them out of my way. Whatever it is, I'm going to do that first because then the work is easier and faster. So sometimes we really have to think quite consciously and a bit more strategically in order to decide where we are. Okay. So let's do a little bit of a conversation about some of the how might we improve our ability to manage up. So there's 3 stages when we think about the pathways and pressure points of influence that I want you thinking about. Stage 1 is planning. Stage 2 is pathways. And stage 3 is pressure points. So I'm going to start you with a quick exercise on how might you plan your influence better. So thinking about that thing that you've written down already, whether it's a project or a business case or some pushback or whatever case you need to make. Let's think about that and let's apply this practically to it. So this exercise is just going to help you to be very purposeful and very, very clear about the end result that you're actually looking for. One of the things that often happens is we sort of go in with a kind of an idea about what we're looking for, and we kind of come out with not quite exactly what we're looking for. Anybody ever gone into an executive meeting and come out with more rather than shipping something and going, great, I got an answer, or great, I got a problem solved? You've come out going, oh my God, how have I got 3 more problems than I went in with? Happens surprisingly frequently when we've kind of gone in a little hazy. When we go in absolutely crisp in terms of what we need to come out with, we tend to come out with it. When we go in and we're not entirely 100% sure, then we come out with, you're not entirely sure. So let's have a look at how we might do that. In the system, in the workbook in the system to manage up, there is a canvas by Nicholas Oswalder. And he is a great marketeer. One of his sort of expertise areas is that he's very good at influencing how people make decisions. Now, in his world, it's the decision to purchase. In our world, it's a decision to sign something off, to say yes, to give you something, to accept your point, to be persuaded. Whatever it is, but actually the brain still works the same way. It's still decisions. So there's a couple of things I want you thinking about with your particular scenario in mind. And I want you to write these down because you're going to test them out with each other in a minute. The first thing is, with this thing that you want, whatever this case is, let's say you want, I don't know, $10,000, $10 million, whatever. Why will they decide in your favor? So why will they say yes? That's the first thing that you want to be really, really clear on. What will be in it for them if they say yes? So what's this marvelous, amazing new world that they're going to be really invested in if they say yes? And what exactly do you want them to say yes to? What's the thing you want to walk away with? So if you walk into that meeting saying, I want to walk away with your pen, okay, make sure you walk away with the pen, the right pen, not just any pen, the pen you want. So why would they give you the pen? And what effect will this have on them? What's in it for them? So hopefully you've got your version of the pen. Really, really clear. What is your ask? Why will they say yes? What's going to be better for them if they do? I'm going to give you a teeny tiny little technique to try when you script this out and test this on each other. So what do I want is up to you. That's just your very specific ask and your really deliberate intention walking into the room. When you think about why they'll decide in your favor, there's a really good construct that I quite like to use. And this one came from Malcolm Gladwell, who's another person that I've got a massive mental crush on. In fact, I've read nearly all his books. He is writing too many right now. I'm not keeping up. He basically said that there are 3 reasons that people make a decision to purchase. They make a decision to say yes: pain, fear, and opportunity. That really resonates for me when I look at corporate constructs. And actually, the research shows that in the corporate landscape, only about 2% of people will make a purchasing decision or decide to say yes to you based on opportunity. Most of them will say yes based on pain or fear. So what might that look like at work? Well, pain might be pain points. So things that are not working very well, things that keep falling over, keep breaking, keep getting in their way, stopping them from getting to their happy place, getting to what they want. That's a really good lever. The other one is fear. So that might be, and I'm sure you've all seen this work, the fear of being in the Herald Sun, the fear of a legislative failure, the fear of someone being hurt by decisions or indecisions that we make. So have a think about this thing that you want. Can you link it to a pain or a fear lever? So you literally might be able to say something like, I've come here today to ask you for X, because if we don't take action on this, this is what will happen. However, if we do take action on this, this is what will happen. And what we're doing there is we're going through clear purpose, leveraging that pain or fear, and then thinking about what's in it for you. So that lovely future state that makes them all go, I want that. But remember, until you've actually tapped into that pain or fear factor, the I want that won't be strong enough. So walk through that in your own head with your real life example. And I'm going to throw you into a breakout room, this time with just 2, so that you can kind of test out your statement on each other. And I want you to keep it pretty succinct. I'm only going to give you 7 minutes, and that's enough for you both to have a go. Share that with each other and just get some immediate feedback on, you know, oh, is that working for me? Was that punchy enough? Am I getting cut through? All right, here we go. All right. Fewer smiley faces in the room this time. Was that a little bit tricky?
Mm.
Yeah, it's a bit challenging. And there's a couple of reasons why, right? So number one is that we jump into a breakout room with people who don't know our business. So what's the very first thing we feel that we have to do? We have to kind of explain the context, yeah? It's kind of like walking into a room full of executives who don't know your business, and that very, very strong urge to explain the context. The problem with explaining the context to our executives is that they don't have the time or the bandwidth, or sometimes the interest. Sometimes they actually trust you. They just want you to cut to the chase. So there's a real battle that goes on internally with us. Did anybody struggle with that a little bit? Did anybody find that they were kind of going into kind of let me take you on the journey mode, which is something that we get taught, isn't it? Let me take you on the journey. Actually,
Rebecca, I actually have a real life example. I got the meeting that I wanted yesterday, and I started that, and they stopped me and they're like, "What do you want, Kate?" And so I just said it.
Yeah.
But I started with okay, this is why I'm coming here. And they're like, I know that. Just tell me what you want. And as soon as I did that, it changed the conversation completely. And it was a very beneficial conversation. But I needed that executive to just cut that, pull me up on it, and then me to feel awkward, vulnerable, and go, oh my goodness, I might put my foot in it. But it turned out to be completely positive experience. And so obviously sometimes when we do that, it might not be, but for the first time ever, what you were just explaining, it was a good outcome.
That's a brilliant example. And thank you for sharing that, Kate, because that is exactly the illustration of what I mean. Has anyone ever had something similar? An executive go, oh, a little bit too much detail, or I need that much detail from you, or just tell me what you need from me. You know, lovely, kind, beautiful ways, but ultimately, what are they actually asking for? They're asking not to be taken on the journey. They are too busy. Their brains are already completely exploding with information, and you are the expert. So there's a funny thing that happens for us when we are experts is that we want to prove it. And that's part of why we talk too much. There is also the need to provide context, the why I'm here. But actually, sometimes when you just hit them with that headline and you simply say, the reason I'm here is that I need to ask you for money, it actually helps their brains to concentrate on the information that comes next. If they're trying to work out why you're giving them information and where you're going with it, you're really burning through some serious calories mentally. They're not appreciating you burning their bandwidth. They haven't got enough to spare. And they start getting quite impatient. And you might see them doing the whole, where are we going with this? Where are you going with this? What? Okay, great, but can you get to the point? They actually start to get a little bit cross. And as we know, the minute that we start to get a little bit cross or confused, the chances of saying yes drop exponentially. A confused brain says no, a cross brain says no. Anything that fogs your executive's brain is going to drop your odds of getting what you want. So actually cutting to the chase, which feels sometimes a bit rude, as Kate experienced, is exactly what they want. And they're quite grateful for it if you do it in the right way. So that's an interesting one. Did anyone else spot any other kind of major hiccups on that one? Did it just feel really abrupt, to say it quite as short and sharp as that? Or did it sort of flow after a little bit?
It was an eye-opening for me because there's already a proposal being drafted. But when I applied your model pain, fear, opportunity, suddenly I thought, I could have added that as additional pain, and I got 2 additional fear, which I can add. So I'm going to completely rewrite that proposal. So
fantastic, Jojo. That's brilliant. I'm really, really pleased. So Jojo's got onto something quite important here. You know, there's always a section in your business case template that says something like benefits. Yeah?
Yep.
So we use the pain and fear pieces as a little bit of a contra benefit, right? So not doing it will bring us this. That can kind of fit in the benefits space. One of the things to be careful of is don't have too many. You get what's called message dilution. So pick the 2 or 3 maximum 3 that are really painful or really scary. And sometimes just one is enough. I know I've got some comms people in the room, but anyone who's ever worked in communications or probably human resources will absolutely know that if we simply say, if we don't do this, we're going to end up in the Herald Sun, it is really impossible not to get a yes. Now, you don't want to overplay that hand, but things like that work amazingly accurately. So just be careful with having too many benefits. Pick the one that matters the most. That will get more cut through mentally.
Great.
Okay, good. So now that Jojo's brought up the prospect of kind of writing a proposal, doing a template, something like that, I want to talk to you a little bit about, very little bit, about the pathways. Anybody ever heard the phrase, get your ducks in a row? This is exactly what I'm talking about. That is, if stakeholders were ducks. I quite like most of my stakeholders, so I don't think of them as ducks, but I definitely want you to, for the purpose of this exercise, think of your stakeholders as ducks, because we're going to get them in a row. One of the things that happens in really big, complicated organizations, and you're all working in those, is that navigating the pathway to getting a decision can be quite complicated. What typically happens is that those organizations will set you up a vehicle and a process. So they'll say, right, business case is under this amount of money, use this template, it goes to this committee, it'll get signed off in this way. Bigger ones have to go through these committees, then up to this exco, and it will get signed off in this way and use this template. Anybody ever filled out a really complicated template and then got told that they were in the wrong template?
Yeah.
So annoying, right? It's not like we're not busy enough, man. Okay, this is the mistake we made. And this is not to be shared with your bosses and certainly not to be shared with the finance partners. I'm so sorry. I know there's 1 or 2 in the room and I mean this with love, but the process of influencing is not templates and processes. It is conversations with key stakeholders. So instead of starting by writing your proposal, I would actually suggest that you end this stage by writing your proposal. So when you get your ducks in a row, you want to think about who are all the people that I need to kind of be either a definite yes or a why not. And I definitely need to know who's going to be a blocker. I'm going to get a whole load of feedback by having these conversations with these key stakeholders. And then I'm going to sit down and write the proposal once. And I know it's going to land because they've already told me what's going to land. Typically what we do, because we're busy and we're dutiful and we follow due process, is we fill out the template, then we go to the committee, and then we're really horribly surprised when somebody says no, somebody says I don't care, and somebody goes, it's first I've heard about it, and you don't get what you want in the room. So never risk not getting what you want in the room, because the chance of you being invited back to have another crack are really low. Really hard to re-prosecute a definite no from your executive committee. So I would say, and I've often done it, I've actually pulled things off the agenda because I wasn't convinced I was going to get a yes. And I'll wait another month to make sure I do, rather than follow the process. Jojo, you've got a question for us.
Thanks, Rebecca. That is one of the holding back point I discussed with the team earlier, because, for example, if you're talking about a liability variation on an existing contract, that particular e-brief needs to go through procurement with the legal, with multiple level of executives. So we don't get to meet and verbally influence them. It's purely going based on the limited number of words in that brief. So that is something really impacting many of the decision making.
Yes, okay, is that they're probably not reading it the right way, or they're reading it a bit quickly, or somebody that they trust, and this is where the pathways matter, somebody they trust read it and told them that they think it's a no. And I promise you this, the odds are the more senior the executive, the less likely they are to have actually read your brief, because they have people they trust in their chain of command that do that for them. So it might be their principal advisor, it might be a particular director in that chain. And they'll just say, Jojo, did you read the brief? Yes, I did. What do you think? It's a no from me. Okay, it's a no from me. It's a no from us. So this is why thinking about that pathway is really important, because you need to know who is that director that influences that executive to either read it lightly, already thinking no, or not read it at all because they trust their number two. Who is that principal advisor? Who is that person that's in their ear, or that gateway that it has to go past? So this is what I mean by getting your ducks in a row. Sometimes we actually have to think quite creatively about who's in the decision-making process. And when I say the decision-making process, I'm talking about the human process rather than the official process. Because there are quite a lot of humans that make the decisions that might sit outside the official process, or you might get to too late. They might be too senior, too far away from you. And you've got to think about, how do I get to them? How do I get them knowing this is coming? And how do I get them in a space where they're already inclined to say yes when they get it? So sometimes you've got 2 or 3 people you've got to kind of send up because you don't have the relationship at the top. And you've got to work out who might champion this message for me so that when the brief lands, they know what it is and they just sign it off. So again, it's removing and eliminating the surprise factor that only due process. So if you believe in only due process, you're increasing the surprise factors of humans making weird decisions or decisions that don't go your way. If you can get the humans already kind of like, sounds all right, yeah, got no problem with it, can't see why I wouldn't sign it off. If you can just get them there, then when they read it, they're reading it with a different head on. They're reading it with, I've kind of already said yes. As opposed to, what is this? I don't like it. I don't understand it. It's probably a no. Or I'm reading that thing that Jojo said was nonsense. It's nonsense. I'm just not even reading it. I've got my head on. And my head says no before I've even opened the deck. So this little bit of influencing that you can do when you think about your pathways is really, really important. So here's a couple of things to think about. So logically, who's kind of invested in your pitch? Is there somebody that is a real ally who's got direct impact in the decision being a yes that isn't you? So when we think about, if there were 3 or 4 of you that said we really, really need this, they'll listen more than if there was just one of you saying we really, really need this. So who might those people be? Do they exist? Are there some social influencers? And I know this feels weird, but perhaps people who have kind of a responsibility to influence people at a cultural level or a reputational level. So marketing, communications, HR are often ignored as potential influencers because they have a particular optic that executives do listen to. So if my head of HR said, oh, if we don't do that, it's going to be a terrible look internally, I know my case is more likely to get up. So it's just using little knowledge bases like that. Another one is functional. So who actually owns the benefit? So if you're going in there and saying, we're going to save $500,000, who exactly is going to save $500,000? Because you want them pitching this as well as you. The invisible wall. I love this one. There's a great story. This is quite non-linear. So this is where you really have to have your antennae up, and you might be asking other people, who else influences the final signatory or the final group? So, a classic one is the Clintons. The chief of staff who forgot to ask Hillary got the sack. Now, she officially had no job in the pathway of her husband making presidential decisions and signing off executive papers. But if you forgot to ask Hillary, your odds of getting a yes were 0. Now, quite interestingly, the Australia Post, where I spent 6 years, probably the most influential person in the room who was never in the room was our CEO's speechwriter. So I fostered a brilliant relationship with him because then I could learn exactly what went on in my CEO's head, even though I wasn't senior enough to be in the room with my CEO more than 3 or 4 times a year. It also meant that I could put things into his head through Paul, through the speechwriter, by making suggestions and adding a little bit of data here or there. Things would flow back up and I would hear about them in a speech or a newsletter later on. Never heard about them directly, but that was okay with me. I was getting what I wanted. So think about that kind of invisible wall. There will be some around in your business, and they're really useful. So those are a couple of kind of people or personas to be thinking about when you plan your pathway. It's not always the obvious people who have a delegation of authority to sign something off, because it hasn't been signed off until your brain has been influenced one way or another way. And if we can get smarter at that influencing the brain bit, then the sign-off bit gets easier and faster and much more successful. I'm going to pause there for a sec, see if anyone's got any questions. And I'm not going to go into the pressure points bit. Now, the reason for that is that it's actually all outlined in the system to motivate. So that's really where we're starting to kind of supercharge your conversations with all those ducks by using neuroscience. That's a different system. We can learn that at a different time. What I really want you thinking about after today is getting that pitch right. So making sure you're really clear on your purpose. You're really clear on why they're going to say yes, that pain or fear lever. And you're pretty clear on why the world is going to be a better place after they've said yes to whatever it is you're asking them for. So what's in it for them? And then the second layer is, who exactly do I need to go and talk to? Because I'm just going to test out this pitch with them, maybe 4 or 5 of them, before I actually write anything formal and start that formal process going. So those are the 2 sort of stages I want you to concentrate on. And before I let you do that, has anyone got any questions about it?
Rebecca, this might be slightly outside of the scope of what you want to cover, but I'm one of those people that you need to get on side to get past my executive. Yeah, and so I'm interested in reflections on influencing back the other direction, and if there are different ways that should be done, or better ways to help me manage my time and the influence I then use the other direction, like back up the chain again.
Okay, great. So if you're somebody that actually typically gets pitched quite often, and some of us will be, is your question, how do I kind of triage what I'm taking up and what I'm pushing back on?
Yeah, and how I make sure that the way I influence down back out into the business is as effective as possible.
Yeah, great. I would actually use some of this in reverse. So I'd love you to actually do the system. I think it's really, really useful to kind of dig a bit deeper and get those constructs. But one of the things that you'll find, and if I think about it as an executive that has often had to say no to things that maybe emotionally I'm quite into, but they're just not making sense. One of the really important bits is testing that pitch. So if you're somebody who is a bit of a gatekeeper or a triager or a sense maker for their executive, then this is really useful for you. Is that pitch working for you? If they come to you with a ropey pitch that's all about context and you don't understand where they're going with it, do exactly what Kate's experience showed you. Just say, hey, let me stop you here. I need you to tighten this up. What exactly are you asking me to ask for? So give them a bit of coaching. So I'd really like it to come back a bit more like this, because this is what works for my boss. And what you can also do then is really kind of give them some advice and just say, look, that pain point at the moment, not painful. Yeah, it's really, that is not going to get on the radar as super important. That risk, we're managing it over here. So some really great advice and a really good technique when you think about your pathways. If you're getting that feedback from these little stakeholders along the way, perhaps think about, could I buddy up? So if somebody does say to you, oh, I think they're dealing with that in another project, go find the other project. See if you can partner up your needs with their needs, because you become more powerful together. So what Nick's doing and what many of you are doing is trying to stop 1,000 small requests coming up to their executive, but they'd be very supportive if we could trim that down to 10 big, really important, really compelling requests. And if you were all partnering up, no problem, where it makes sense. So really use those pathways of influence as a way of testing, is my pitch right? Are my pain points enough? Is the risk significant? Is there anyone else I need to know about? Anyone else I can buddy up with to be bigger and more important when I go and do my ask officially? So that was actually a really good question, Nick. Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. All right, gang. So I'm going to get you to just have a think about one little thing that you might do differently after today. It might be something to do with your diary. It might be something to do with who you're going to go and talk to. It might be something to do with how you're going to go and talk about it. But in the link I've just thrown into the chat is the link to Ask Rebecca. So this will give you an opportunity to write a little note, and it can be really, really short, about what you might try. So a little experiment or a little commitment that you're going to make. And I will help you with that by pointing out some areas where perhaps there's some more resources or some easy reading or listening that you can do to help you boost that commitment. And once you've written that down, you can go and enjoy your Friday afternoon. And if you're here in Melbourne, it's sunny again. Miserable yesterday, but now we're back to normal. Thanks, everybody. See you now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks.